Gdansk in the north of Poland. Between 1975 and 1983, serial killer Paweł Tuchlin, armed with a hammer, viciously attacked 20 women in and around the busy port city. 9 of the women were callously killed. All were sexually assaulted in what were harrowing times for the people of Gdansk.
It would have been really terrifying being a woman in this area of Poland at this particular point in time. There have been all these hammer attacks on women, 9 were killed, and this is going on for years, and all the time women have still got to go out to work, shop for groceries, they've still got to be in and around public spaces where they might be at risk.
Investigative journalist Krzysztof Wojcik followed the case.
When all this happened, there was a psychosis of fear here on the coast. Women were afraid of going out in the evenings. If they had to go out, or when they finished working in the evening, men were asked to join them, to protect them.
Making matters worse, these were politically troubled times in Poland. A revolution was brewing, and for the government and their communist police force or militia, catching a killer was a low priority. Andrzej Gawrysz was a detective with the unit in Gdansk that eventually caught Tuchlin.
This was not the greatest time in the history of Poland. The authorities weren't too bothered to reveal that a criminal was prowling in our area.
The preoccupation with political dissidents allowed Tuchlin free rein for 8 years. In that time, he sexually assaulted and murdered 9 women and attacked another 11 who survived.
I think Tuchlin got used to getting away with it. There was something in him. He was a loner, he was an ordinary man who seemed to be able to get away with attacking women almost at will because he was quite careful. He chose isolated spots, rural communities, where there was no one to see him.
This killer's story begins some 70 years ago. Paweł Tuchlin was born on the 28th of April 1946 in the village of Góra, some 40 miles from Gdansk. There were 11 children in the family. Paweł Tuchlin was the 8th.
Tuchlin is born in a rural community in Poland, fairly isolated. The parents, Bernard and Monica, are farmers, and it's a fairly disciplined household. The father is violent, often drunk.
As a child, Tuchlin would wet the bed.
There were times when his father beat him for wetting the bed. This problem was never taken care of.
Violence filled Tuchlin's childhood.
His parents were farmers. There was quite a lot of violence in the household. Violence was part and parcel of everyday life. Growing up, he's learning that violence is a way of getting things done, that controlling people, that having authority over them is achieved through being physically harmful towards them.
Tuchlin's bedwetting continued into his teens with devastating consequences.
Paweł wet himself. It led to the problems with making connections with his peers. The kids at school called him a stinker, a firefighter, or a pisser. He was an object of ridicule in the classroom. He wet himself up until he was 18 years old. He was not accepted by his peers, not to mention the girls.
He smells quite strongly of urine. The other kids aren't going to want to hang around with him. They're going to make fun of him. So everywhere he goes, he's isolated, and he's somebody who is increasingly going towards the margins.
Tuchlin had problems forming relationships with women.
He was intimidated by them, probably from a very early age. He found women too frightening to really interconnect with.
As a teen, Tuchlin became a voyeur.
He starts engaging in a behaviour known as scoptophilia, or voyeurism. So he gets pleasure, he gets sexual gratification through watching women through their windows, and this makes him feel quite powerful.
Aged 18, Tuchlin moved from his village to the suburbs of Gdansk and got a job working in construction.
He wants to start afresh in a city where nobody knows him. And he seems to achieve this for at least a short period of time. So he meets a woman, they get married, they have a baby.
It was quickly apparent to his wife, and then probably pretty apparent to him, that this wasn't going to work. The marriage was going to collapse. Indeed it did. It ended in divorce in 1973.
After the separation from his wife, Tuchlin retreated into his own world, one filled with deviant fantasies that would soon turn deadly.
Tuchlin's sexual madness evolved gradually. Then exhibitionism was added. Tuchlin wandered around Gdansk and he just exposed himself in front of girls. He often wore a coat and would get his penis out and flash.
One of the first times that Tuchlin is known to have exposed himself in public was near to the city's medical academy.
He would undress, unzip his jacket. One student saw his penis and, "Hey dude, you have nothing to show," and she started to laugh. In this moment, Tuchlin got pissed off. For sure, it upset him. That was a moment when he thought, "Bloody women, I will show you."
He's got these urges, he wants to fulfill them, and the only way that he's going to do that is going to be through force.
Tuchlin decided that to satisfy his urges and avoid rejection, he would have to subdue his next target. He used a hammer and a method he learned as a child on the farm.
He hit the women so they wouldn't move. He stunned them, just as he learnt to do when he lived in the country, when his father stunned the pigs before he killed them.
Tuchlin's first known physical attack came when he was 29 years old. On the 31st of October 1975, Tuchlin spotted 21-year-old Danusia. The waitress was on her way home after work. An investigator who played a key role in the killer's capture, Stanislav Świek, vividly recalls the assault by Tuchlin that night.
He attacks this girl, smashes her with a hammer, and drags her to the bushes. Suddenly, a witness comes along, a woman. She hears the girl whimpering.
He tried to undress her, but he was scared away by the couple that was passing by.
So he says to the woman, "I think someone's groaning over there. Something bad must have happened. You stay here and I'll go call the ambulance." He then calmly walks away.
The woman fortunately survived.
Danusia was really lucky that she was found so quickly. It was the decisive factor for her. The police and ambulance came and they took her to the hospital. She was in critical condition. They managed to save her life. It was only because Tuchlin did not stay with her.
Tuchlin was not caught after his first attack, and more troubling was that his violent fantasy of subduing a woman and sexually molesting her had not been fully satisfied. So 2 months later, in January, armed with a hammer, he struck again.
I think at this point in time, he does feel like he can do whatever he likes, that the authorities are never going to catch up with him.
On the 31st of May 1983, 3 weeks after his last murder, the police arrived to finally arrest 37-year-old Paweł Tuchlin.
When we saw Paweł, the four of us were sat in the car and we all thought, It must be him. It must be him. The police approached Tuchlin when they already knew he was a murderer. But the cooker was a pretext to arrest him. They handcuffed him, and you don't do this for such a petty crime.
They took Tuchlin in, and Andrzej led the questioning.
The interrogation lasted around 4.5 hours, but Paweł stayed calm throughout the whole thing. At first, he didn't want to talk. He said he didn't remember. We were asking him about specific places and specific dates. And step by step, Paweł began to reveal the truth.
A leading Polish forensic expert, Adrian Wrocławski, analysed the case.
Following Tuchlin's arrest and during the search of his property, where a lot of evidence was secured, the officers found his shoes in the cupboard of his electrical workshop.
When they found the murder weapon too, a blood-stained hammer, Tuchlin's fate was sealed.
Once Tuchlin was actually confronted with evidence, he knew the game was up. He knew that he may as well confess. He may as well sort of get it off his chest, if you like, but most of all, probably be able at last to brag about it.
Then, in an extraordinary move, the police took Tuchlin back to the scenes of his crimes and had him reenact the attacks.
He was so excited by these events that during the investigation, he often said he could show more during the reconstructions. And he even asked, as there were legal apprentices there, to get the younger girls so he could demonstrate it better as they turned him on.
Not only was he reliving what he'd done, he was also kind of showing off to all these fairly indifferent individuals exactly what he had done. And he was, to some degree, proud of it.